Hey everyone, Mike here and welcome back to the SimRacing Den. I reviewed my Fanatec shifter in a previous video which has been with me since my SimRacing journey started. I also discussed how it compared on paper to both the newer Moza Racing HDP shifter and the VNM shifter, which the latter will be the focus of review for this video. I stated in that video that neither would be worthy upgrades or replacements to my trusty Fanatec shifter, and made the case that for someone buying a shifter for the first time, the Fanatec, albeit several years old now, is still a great buy. Still, after some consideration and feedback from my viewers, I decided to give the VNM shifter a try to provide a more informed comparison. I will share some further comparisons on the two, having tested them now back to back, and explain what conclusions I've come to from my own experience and which one I'll be sticking with on my rig for the long term. My review of the VNM shifter will cover several categories, including build quality and design, features, performance, overall immersion, and then I'll discuss some things I like and that I don't. If you're in the market for a high quality and affordable shifter for your SimRacing setup, or trying to decide whether it's worth replacing your Fanatec shifter like me, then the VNM might be what you're looking for. First, let's get pricing out of the way. At the time of recording this video, Fanatec's Clubsport shifter is going for $259.95, and VNM shifter slightly more at $289. The VNM shifter is made of all aluminum construction, finished in matte black, giving it a sleek, understated, and durable design. It feels solid in my hands when shifting. The complete metal construction also provides the shifter with some realistic tactile feedback and feels very close to my limited experience of shifting in a real car. Like my Fanatec shifter, it's designed to work as either a manual H-pattern style gearbox or a sequential one. This means you can use it for various SimRacing games depending on your preferences. Additionally, the sequential V2 plate can be used as a makeshift handbrake, although I see only a reason to do that if you already have another shifter. I've become quite fond of the look of this shifter. It looks better to me in person than in the photos I've seen. I think it blends in better with the rest of my rig thanks to the all black and cleaner design than the Fanatec. The VNM shifter also comes with an RGB LED lit logo on the front of the housing that allows you to customize the look of your shifter. You can choose from various colors and effects, including static colors, breathing effects, and color cycling. You can also adjust the brightness and the speed of the lighting to your liking. This charming feature adds a cool visual touch to your SimRacing setup. It also allows you to maybe match the color of the shifter to the rest of your gaming rig or computer, or maybe your favorite racing team's colors. The LED lighting is easy to control using the software with the shifter, and you can save your favorite lighting profiles for easy access later on. This feature never really was something I cared much about, but now having it, it does give a nice touch and gives the shifter a more premium and personal feel. So I'm sticking with the static red to keep on brand with the rest of my rig and PC lighting. The one thing that stands out to me when discussing the build is that the open area of the gated shifter on the VNM is quite wide and open. This is part of the design obviously and allows the shaft to shift freely through the gears. However, I prefer Fanatec's implementation of this where the top is covered. It looks better to me, and I think it would also help prevent something from maybe falling inside or dust from building up. So the Fanatec feels more like a finished product when you're looking at it from the top. The VNM shifter bundle includes the following items. Obviously the VNM shifter, a spherical shifting knob, a cylinder knob, the sequential V2 plate, and a 7-gear H-pattern plate, which is 6 plus reverse, a set of complementary hex wrenches, and a USB cable. However, it's worth noting that the desk or table mounting clamps are not included, so you'll need to purchase those separately if you plan to mount this to your desktop driving setup. The VNM shifter has two knob options like I mentioned, the spherical knob and the cylinder knob. This allows you to customize the look and feel of your shifter to your liking. Both the spherical and cylinder knob has a smooth ergonomic design that felt comfortable in my hand and the right size. Like me, most people will settle on the spherical for H-pattern mode and the cylinder for sequential, but the choice is yours obviously. The one downside I see is that unlike the Fanatec, you can't change the knobs to standard automotive or aftermarket ones, but I don't feel any need right now as both suit my preferences just fine. So most importantly, how does the VNM shifter perform in action? Well, I'm happy to report that overall it performs well. But before I talk more about the shifting feel in both modes, I have to mention something that has become a bit of an annoyance for me. After several drive tests in different sims, the problem I've seen, or heard in this case, might be unique to me or my particular setup, and something others might not have tested or just not noticed. First, I used the Butt Kicker Pro for haptics on my rig. It's mounted directly to one of the pieces of profile that my seat is mounted to for me to get feedback on a few things like road surface, tire traction, and other subtle effects like gear shifts. I don't run the output of the butt kicker very high and only run a few effects to keep things from getting muddy. Still, I run the level high enough that it feels somewhat realistic and gives me enough feedback, as I find it helps my driving. Although it may be subjective, detecting better how the car responds on track does help. Still, either way, it adds another layer of immersion, which I enjoy and would miss now if I didn't have it. When using this in conjunction with the VNM Shifter, I found that whenever the shifter was in any gear other than the neutral position, the haptics caused the shaft of the shifter to vibrate and rattle against the gates of the shifter plate. Let me show you how this sounds so you can better understand what I'm talking about. It's loud enough to me that when racing without headphones and the speakers at an average volume, to the point where I find it both disruptive and a bit annoying. If I have headphones on, I don't hear it much, but my wife did complain in the other room that she could hear it, and she's never complained about the sound from my haptics before, as they are primarily a low enough frequency. Now, I don't think this is because of an issue with my particular unit, because the design itself means that when the shifter is in the gear, the shaft is just going to make some contact with the metal of the gates. And the actual shifting of gears doesn't produce any annoying sounds. A lot of the other YouTuber reviews that I watched didn't mention this, but I don't know if they were using haptics at the time or didn't produce the same situation at the time of testing it. Some might think I might be being nitpicky, as I don't expect my rig obviously to be completely silent. Still, the sound is annoying enough that it takes me a bit out of the experience and immersion of driving, and any hardware that does that in the long run will probably not stay on my rig unless it's something that I can resolve. So it's a bit of a tough one, since I like a lot about the VNM Shifter and I wanted to give it a real shot, since many spoke very highly of it. The shifting feel is very nice, but it's definitely not night and day from my Fanatec shifter, and the fact that the Fanatec is silent when in gear, doesn't produce any unwanted noises when running the haptics, is indeed a strike for me in making the case for replacing it. Although not everyone might experience this, I think it was worth mentioning for prospective buyers who want to know as much as possible before ordering a piece of hardware. But let's continue with the rest of the review. The shifter does have a nice solid feel, and the tactile feedback feels very natural. The adjustable tension also makes it easy to fine-tune the shifter to your liking so you can get the exact feel that you want. I prefer a stiffer feel to prevent misshifting and giving me better accuracy. The H pattern and sequential plates both work well, and I didn't experience any issues while using either outside of the sound issue. So how does it compare to the Fanatec shifter? After driving both back to back, the VNM does feel very right to me. Maybe it's the novelty of something new, but it just feels smoother and a bit more satisfying as I run through the gears. Don't get me wrong though, the Fanatec is still an excellent performing shifter. I'm actually finding it difficult to decide which one I prefer best now, but I honestly found both equally fun. One thing I did notice with the VNM is that I was more frequently misshifting, but this may be likely due to my muscle memory on the Clubsport shifter. Now let's talk about the sequential mode. The one downside I find with both the Fanatec and the VNM is that neither does an outstanding job of sequential shifting, and if you are the type of person who primarily drives in that mode, I still think a dedicated sequential shifter is going to be better suited for you, and there are plenty of options on the market to choose from right now. However, the VNM felt much better in sequential mode than the Fanatec. I was actually really surprised by how much better it was. Now it's fair to mention that I've never tried a dedicated sequential shifter, so I don't know exactly how it should feel, but it's certainly better than the Fanatec in this mode. The Clubsport shifter never felt right in sequential, with a sticky feel when shifting gears. The VNM has a way more satisfying feel with an addicting sound when shifting gears, and I found myself actually enjoying sequential for the first time, which is now making me actually desire a dedicated sequential shifter. The sound of it is a bit clanky though and loud, so it might be an issue if you're racing while someone is trying to sleep in the room next to you. Here is a recording of how it sounds in sequential mode. Switching from H pattern to sequential mode is as quick and straightforward as it gets on the Fanatec shifter by flipping one of the switches on either side and you're done. On the VNM, it's a process of getting the included hex key, unscrewing 4 bolts on the top of the plate, swapping for the other plate, and retightening the bolts. When I picked at this procedure in my last video, some of my viewers who own this shifter argued how often I will be just switching from one or the other in one sitting, and that's a valid argument. The truth is, I don't, and if I'm honest, I don't use sequential shifting all that often. I don't drive manually all that usually either. Now, one of my faithful viewers, Thoritis Sim Garage, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who also has a SimRacing YouTube channel, describes the process of switching the modes on the VNM to that of the same process in real life of setting up your race car for the particular track or conditions, which is not a bad comparison now that I think about it, and in reality the process isn't that painstaking of a process unless you're the type of person who's switching often back and forth in one sitting, which I imagine is probably a limited number of sim racers. So I decided to time the process anyway, so you can see how long it takes at an average human level pace. So enjoy. So, not as quick as the Fanatec obviously, but it doesn't take long enough for you to groan necessarily every time you have to do it. So it's no longer a deal breaker for me per se, but I'll let you decide on your use case whether it is for you. Fanatec Shifter is compatible with a broad range of accessories and mounting options, which makes it more versatile choice for sim racers who maybe want to customize their setup extensively. But a lot of the more recent rigs now support the VNM Shifter. At least that was the case for me with my ASR Pro, the shifter plate mount which has holes that align perfectly with the ones on the shifter. Also, the Fanatec Shifter can be used with PlayStation or Xbox, however only when connected directly to a console-compatible Fanatec wheelbase. The VNM on the other hand is a USB connection with PC support only, so that's an obvious deal breaker for the console sim racers out there. Lastly, it's worth noting that the Fanatec software is generally more user-friendly I think than VNM software, but in fairness the Fanatec doesn't offer much outside initial calibration. Overall, the VNM SimRacing Shifter and Fanatec Shifter are excellent options for sim racers who want to upgrade their shifting experience. The VNM Shifter's feel for me now does feel a bit better, but that may be only the case for some, as many of these things will be obviously personal preference. Ultimately, the best choice will depend on your individual needs and preferences as a sim racer, but I don't think you can go wrong with either or, but I can safely recommend the VNM Shifter now, having tried it for myself. Overall, I was pleasantly surprised and impressed with the VNM Simulation Shifter, outside of the obvious noise issue which I still need to figure out if I can resolve. The overall design and build both look good and feel very well, outside of the only issue I have with the open gate on the top of the shifter. It's worth considering if you're looking for a shifter that can work as a manual or sequential gearbox. The bundle includes everything you need to get started except for the mounting clamps if you have a desk setup. Let me quickly review now some of the similarities and differences between the Fanatec and the VNM Shifter. First of all, one of the key differences between the two shifters is the price. The VNM Shifter is a bit pricier and doesn't necessarily justify the higher price tag in my opinion, but it's close enough that it may not majorly influence your decision. The two shifters' build quality and construction are primarily metal and sturdy designs. I did appreciate that the Fanatec's top area where the shifter rod protrudes was more closed than the VNM, which is mainly open to make room for the gated plate obviously. Still, this may become more susceptible to dust or debris gathering inside. The top of the Fanatec feels like a more finished product in my opinion. Outside of that, I do now prefer the look of the VNM over the Fanatec, but we're talking about primarily black boxes here, so I don't think this matters that much to most, and the Fanatec shouldn't look out of place on anyone's rig. The VNM Shifter has the addition of the cool looking RGB light if that matters to you, while Fanatec on the other hand does not. When talking about reliability, having only owned the VNM for a few weeks, I can't make a fair comparison yet, but the Fanatec has stood the test of time over a few years of moderate use. Based on the build quality of the VNM, my expectation is it probably will too, but I'll have to report back on that after more of a longer term ownership. Regarding functionality, both shifters offer similar features such as sequential and H-pattern modes. However, the VNM Shifter includes a sequential plate that can also function as a makeshift handbrake, a nice added feature. Finally, I discussed the mode switching in enough detail that I think you understand now the critical difference. Finally, I leave it up to you to decide if it's a deal breaker for you with the VNM. I've since changed my mind on the initial concern. So the big question, what shifter is going to stay on my rig? Well, it's going to be my trusty Fanatec shifter, and I'll explain to you why. Obviously the noise and the sound issue from the vibration from my haptics is enough that it's bothering me, so for that, it's a no. As well as the design on the top of the shifters, I do prefer the finish of the Fanatec shifter having it closed on top. That's just my personal opinion. Now when it comes to the shifting feel, I honestly feel that they're so close that the negative points of the VNM shifter is what's leading me back to the Fanatec. But if you don't own a shifter right now, I think you'd be happy with either or, and I don't think you'd be disappointed with the VNM shifter. But just keep all these points that I mentioned in mind and obviously do your research and watch other reviews to formulate your decision. I hope you found both this review of the VNM and the comparison to my Fanatec shifter helpful in any way, and if you did, do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button as it does help recommend my content to like-minded viewers. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button if you're interested in more sim racing content, and remember to hit the bell if you want to be notified every time I release a new video. Thanks again for watching, and until the next one, stay safe and happy racing.